From The Times and The Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Luke Jones. There are interesting things afoot in Ashfield, the formerly Red Wall seat in Nottinghamshire.
There was a couple of years in the 1970s when the Conservatives won a spectacular by-election, then lost it again in 79. And for the next 40 years, it was a pretty solid, safe Labour seat.
Peter Kellner co-founded Pollster's YouGov and has been writing about this kind of area for the Sunday Times.
As the economy changed from the 1980s onwards, the old industries, factories, mines, the rest of it closed down, and basically Labour lost its grip, not just on the votes, but on the whole culture of these places. Jeff Hoon was its MP for many years, the Labour cabinet minister, then Gloria Piero after 2010.
Thank you to the people of Ashfield for putting their trust in me once again. Theresa May thought she could wipe out the Labour Party at this election. She has failed.
But in 2019...
Ashfield is one of the 9 seats that will decide whether I can get a working majority on Thursday and get Brexit done.
It moved decisively to the Tories. People expressed their discontent. They blamed Europe. They also blamed immigration.
Jeremy Corbyn repelled them and Boris Johnson attracted them. But what about when he left? The Conservative MP for this fiercely unmetropolitan, overwhelmingly leave and economically stagnant part of the country, Lee Anderson, left as well and ended up in the Reform Party.
Who wants the country back?
We do.
Lee?
We do. Who wants the country back? Who wants the country back? Put your hand up. Look, put your hand up. Who wants the country back? Put your hand up if you want your country back. All these people here, darling.
So what is going to happen to all those voters now?
This is the most, I think, interesting known unknown between now and July the 4th. Virtually everywhere, reforms intervention is helping Labour.
The story today: Reform throws a brick in the Tories' red wall. If you don't know Ashfield, this isn't Sherwood Forest, Nottinghamshire. We're on the western side of the county, tucked under Mansfield, up against the border with Derbyshire. It's pretty, it's green. Lord Byron even lived in an old monastery here. But the winding country roads that once revolved around many mines and around rows of pit houses now revolve around, well, empty high streets. The villages are quaint, but the town centres are full of tired-looking takeaways, beauty bars, a few independent shops. I grew up not too far from here. There is a seam of coal miner that runs through my family tree. My desk chair, in fact, is a smart wooden thing liberated from a pit office by my grandfather with the words National Coal Board still incriminatingly engraved in the back. And I can feel something similar-ish here to what was happening in 2016, when it was blindingly obvious that these parts were going to vote Brexit. And in 2019, when it was blindingly clear that people were breaking dramatically away from Labour. In 2024, it's clear that people are fed up with what they've had before, and some, like a lot of the country, are thought to be looking away from the two main parties. But in this territory, it's not going to be the Lib Dems or the Greens ruining the party for Labour or the Tories. It could be Reform.
Who are you voting for? Yes, Kitty!
Nigel Farage!
Do you know them?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Nigel!
I meet these two outside the Nag's Head pub.
I want to vote for Nigel Farage. I feel like people gave him a hard time in I'm a Celebrity, and I thought he was just like an old man. It was really sad.
Well, I seen a video yesterday on TikTok, and he was telling us how much he's going to change our country for the better, or our community.
And he's going to do a better job than Rishi Sunak.
And have you voted before?
No,
Or
I've just signed myself on the electoral register to boost my credit score. But now I've kind of like got into it a little bit.
I didn't stay long there. In fact, as I was wandering around that pub, asking people how they voted, I was accused of being a police officer. And not a very good one, I thought, with my big headset, microphone and recorder. They asked my name, which I gave them. The guy said it was handily common. So I made my excuses, and off I went to a different pub. This one, covered in England flags and 3 lions.
We want a country back. Immigrants, everything's taken over, it's ridiculous. Labour and the Tories it's just a joke. We need to try something different.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I'm voting, yeah.
Well, what's your tattoo?
That's for my missus.
Her king. What does that mean?
I'm her king.
Oh, I see, hence the crown. Got you. Do you live in Ashfield?
I do, yeah. I've kept it all my life.
And are you a voter?
Weren't before, but I am now.
Oh, what made the change?
We've lost the country now.
Everyone keeps saying that to me. We've lost the country, What do you mean?
We've lost the country, we've been invaded. It's not our country anymore. Can't be proud to put your flags up.
Hang on, there's loads of flags around here. It's England, 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 England.
We're in a pub,
Yes.
so they've got to be. I support Farage. They all lie to you, don't get me wrong, but...
What do you make of Rishi Sunak?
Don't like him.
Keir Starmer?
Don't like him either.
Boris Johnson? Oh, you paused.
Just trying to say something quite polite about him, I think, is an absolute lunatic.
What about you?
Well, I'm a Conservative voter, but because my local MP, Lee Anderson, has crossed the floor to reform, I'll be voting for Lee. Legal migration, I've not got a problem with it. Actually, it's good for the country to have people come in who can just, work. The system at the minute is, there's a lot of illegal immigrants. They want to work, but the system don't allow them to. So that way they're a burden on all of us.
Yeah.
That's a problem. That's a problem with Conservative. And Labour are just they're all as bad as each other, to be honest with you. And it's a matter of them doing the job that we've elected them to do.
Could it really be just a one-night stand with the Tories for Ashfield? A rogue vote blue, so quickly reverse-ferreted? Outside a garden centre, I meet the Tory candidate, Debbie Soloman. She has previously stood elsewhere for the Brexit Party, so she has her sympathies with the previous MP, Lee Anderson.
I can understand why, after successive Labour MPs, Ashfield felt they had no change. And that's why they voted for change and a Conservative MP in 2019. Lee has actually been a decent MP for Ashfield and has put Ashfield on the map. And it is about representing your constituency, and he has done that.
Sounds like you're going to vote for him.
No, I want people to vote for me because I think it's a real shame Lee left the party, to be honest. I think it's about changing and fighting from within the party, and Lee was certainly doing that.
It seems like you sort of are sympathetic to his strand of politics as it was within the Conservative Party and miss it. Is that fair? Is that the type of Tory you are to voters in Ashfield?
I think I'm probably right of centre, and most of the members I speak to want that strand of conservatism to come out more strongly. And where they feel let down is because that particular voice in the Conservative Party isn't as loud as they want it to be. So a bit of background about me. Nigel Farage set up the Brexit Party, and I got involved in politics for the very first time. And
with the Brexit Party?
Yes, absolutely. And, I am grateful to Nigel for giving me that opportunity to find my political voice and stand up for what I believed in. So in 2019, I stood as a Brexit Party candidate because people need to be listened to. And it was after that I reflected, and The Brexit Party was about an issue, Brexit, and underlying that democracy. So I felt if I wanted to make a real difference and for that voice to be heard and it never to be threatened again, our democracy, I felt I had to change that from within the Conservative Party.
To make it a bit more like the Brexit Party and maybe like Reform. Are you one of these people who, after everything shakes down after the election, would like to see the right unite and either Reform join the Tories or the Tories sort of meld into Reform somehow? Do you see that happening?
I think the Conservative voices that best represent the country do need to be louder. And I think we need more people doing what Lee did and what I did, coming into the Conservative Party and fighting for that within the Conservative Party.
You need the right-wing voices to be louder in the Conservative Party, is that what you're saying?
I don't think it's right-wing. I think it's the view that the majority of people have.
But that block of right-wing voters here certainly isn't monopolised by the Conservative Party anymore. As Peter Kellner says, the polls suggest that Ashfield will reject the Tories. But they're not necessarily snapping straight back to old habits and returning to the Labour fold. Reform is complicating the picture. We know from the polling that support is bleeding away from the Conservatives, especially in places like this, in Ashfield. But where are those voters going?
Cashed up, please.
It's £30 exactly.
Oh, lovely.
I'm looking for the lesser of the two evils.
Go on.
I've had so many years of being disappointed in politicians. I don't like the opposition leader, and that's a personal thing.
Keir Starmer.
Yeah. Keir doesn't do it for me. He kind of never has.
Who have you voted for in the past?
Labour, always.
What about last time?
Labour.
What about this time?
We're not sure.
Well, I've gone other end of the scale. I have voted Conservative in the past. It's one of those that we don't know. I'm a bit stuck between at the moment.
The question pollsters like Peter Kellner and others are pondering, where might these people's votes go?
In all elections at this stage, there are a fair number of undecideds. I think it's a bit bigger this time. But the key thing which is distinctive about this election is these don't knows are very, very heavily skewed towards people who voted Conservative in 2019. Normally the don't knows, as it were, are a bit like the whole country, only less bothered by politics. Young, old, left, right, whatever. This time, the don't knows are very heavily skewed to people who voted for Boris Johnson, who wanted to get Brexit done, but are now disillusioned. They've not yet found another party. One of the things that I think Keir Starmer has done very effectively, plainly, completely unlike Jeremy Corbyn, is he's defanged the Labour Party. 2019, a lot of people weren't very happy with Boris Johnson, but they were terrified of what a Jeremy Corbyn government would do. So that terror drove them into the arms of Boris Johnson. Well, now it's not clear that all that many of these people who've switched from Tory to Reform, they don't particularly like Labour, they're suspicious of Labour, but I'm not sure they're frightened of Labour. And so their desire to give the Tories a kicking outweighs their dislike of Labour. That's now, but can the Tories change that equation? On Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, I say to myself, these people who voted Tory last time, the one thing we can be sure about is they will vote. The question is, how will they vote? And on Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays, I say, well, maybe this time they're so disillusioned with everybody, maybe they will stay at home.
The person hoping these voters choose Reform is their candidate, Lee Anderson.
Anybody all right?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. How are you?
I just got on it Nag's Head last night.
He's a former miner who has been a Labour councillor, a Tory MP, and is now the area's Reform candidate. He's hoping he can scare voters off Labour.
You've got Angela Rayner and Lammy and them sort of characters being very, very quiet at the moment. They're just lurking around in the shadows. And I reckon if he does become PM, the daggers will be out pretty sharpish. They're funded by the unions, as we know. There's a lot of loonies on the left that just can't wait to put the knife in his back.
And he's leaning into an issue that many people around here are concerned about: immigration.
Immigration.
Why is that?
Is it because there's 1.2 million coming last year, same year before? People can't
But not around here.
Yeah, listen, you can't get dental appointments, you can't get doctor's appointments, you can't. The roads are an absolute disgrace. Nothing's working in this country. No. Let me finish. It does affect round here. There's no borders in Ashfield. There's no borders in Nottinghamshire. When you get 1.2 million people coming into the country and 700,000 net migration coming to the country each year. That's the size of two cities, the size of Nottingham. Housing prices go up, rents go up, the waiting lists go up. It affects every single thing in this country.
So you think that's why we've got waiting lists, that's why people can't get dentist appointments, immigrants?
No, I'm not saying it's just because of immigrants in total. It's because, like I said before, the whole state is broken. This government and previous governments do not know how to spend taxpayers' money.
Are you spinning people a bit of a yarn? Because I take your point that we've seen lots of immigration coming to the UK, but here, in this area, in the decade up to 2021, it went up 5%, the population. That's less than the East Midlands as a whole. That's less than the UK as a whole. Yeah. It's overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly British. There isn't that much immigration.
And what did the birth rate go up by in that period of time?
But you're saying there has been a lot of immigrants coming in.
There are no borders in Ashfield. When we get 700,000 net migration into this country, it affects the whole country. Mass migration affects everything in this country. You know that. That's just common sense.
So the plan is what?
To cap migration. And net zero migration, that's what we want. We've got over 1 million people in this country that's unemployed. We need to find them a job and get them back to work. We've got about 7 million people in this country that's economically inactive. We need to help them get back to work.
But you're saying to me, all those economically inactive people will go and fill those jobs that immigrants
they should go to work. When I was leaving school back in the 80s, it was unheard of not to go to work. We were fighting to get jobs in this area because the pits were closing.
Can I ask you about your party? It's had an issue recently with some unsavoury types. I mean, you've lost one candidate because of what he said about the BNP. The Times found that 1 in 10 of Reform UK's candidates are friends on Facebook with British fascists. But why is that the case?
I've no idea. You can't be totally confident that you don't have some bad apples in that barrel.
I mean, you yourself have had your own racism around the past, and it's part of the reason you left the
no
Tory
racism
party.
Around.
With Sadiq Khan?
No, it wasn't for me. It was for the people on the left. I just called him out for being incompetent and losing control of the streets of London. I never mentioned his race or his skin colour or anything.
You said who's helping his Islamist mates.
But that's not him.
Do you think your party attracts racists?
I don't know. I think but you look at the Labour Party, they was investigated and found to be institutionally racist, anti-Semitic, I think. So
which isn't a good thing, but is your party the same?
There is hints of racism across all walks of society. All walks of society. It's not just for one political party. And like I say, there are a few bad apples in every barrel.
You think it's just hints of racism within Reform?
Just hints. It's just hints in every political party. Stop trying to put words in my mouth, young man.
On the candidates being friends with the British fascist leader on Facebook, a Reform UK spokesperson told The Times, quote, "We take all allegations very seriously and will take appropriate action after a thorough internal investigation." They said it was, quote, "no crime to follow people with whom one has profound disagreements." Would some of these party scandals, reported in The Times and elsewhere, put enough voters off, though? Even despite the local appeal that Lee Anderson has, the Labour candidate is certainly hoping so.
I'm Rhea Keehn and I'm the Labour Parliamentary candidate for Ashfield. We're in Sutton Town Centre, Sutton in Ashfield, right by the sundial.
How are things going?
Yeah, look, it's going really good. We're getting a really welcome response. Most people are just desperate for change, but I'm not complacent. I've absolutely got to earn every vote, and that's exactly what we are doing as a team. The big thing is that we've got a chance here in Ashfield to bring about big differences.
This is a place which used to vote Labour solidly ever since the late 70s, and some people have suggested they didn't get a lot for it. What is different now about the Labour Party if they come back here?
You know what, I really do feel the sense of tiredness that people have because they've had 14 years of the Conservative government, and quite frankly we're all a bit exhausted of the lies and the games and the lack of promises being kept that we've had for 14 years. We've got a changed Labour Party now. We've got a really exciting vision. We've got an actual plan that is fully costed where we can deliver some real change that matters to people in Ashfield, and only with a Labour MP will we get that delivered.
Do you know what I've heard most about? Almost exclusively.
Yeah.
Can you guess?
Immigration?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, second to potholes. Surely potholes must have beat you.
No. Immigration first. And I just wonder, have you as clear a stronger pitch on that?
Immigration does come up, and as we've said, under a Labour Party, we'll actually put a plan in place to tackle that. So having a secure border command, so we can invest in our borders and control them and protect them in the right way. Whereas the current government, which of course Lee Anderson was part of, consistently neglected and cut back in that area. Because when people do talk to me about migration and illegal migration, so often they are talking about the sense of fairness, and that it feels like as a Britain, we are being mugged off by these criminal gangs who smuggle people in, so the human trafficking gangs and the drug dealer gangs who are just committing offences. They have no intention of doing any good here, and they're the ones we need to tackle.
But it's also legal migration that people have got an issue with, not just the illegal migration.
Yeah, and again, we have a plan to make sure that is a real fair and robust system.
Back looking into Peter Kellner's crystal ball, how could all of this shake down?
I reckon there are something like 100 seats that Labour will win because of Reform's intervention and Nigel Farage's participation, because this means Reform is now running around, 15, 16, 17% in the polls. If they hold on to anything like that, then that increases Labour's majority hugely. The question is, will the Conservatives in 5 years' time be in any fit state to pose a serious challenge to Labour? The Tories posed no real challenge in 2001, the election after Blair's 1997 landslide, just as Labour posed no real challenge to the Tories in either 1983 or 2015, the two elections after they'd lost power. Now, one normally says when parties are having trouble, what you need is a leader who can unite the party around a consensus. Well, that's normally true, but this time, my own view is that if you had a Tory leader who sought consensus, it would come unstuck. I think the Tory party has to decide whether it works with Reform and moves towards being a seriously nationalist party, or whether it goes back to being a party of the centre-right, if you like, a pragmatic patriotism rather than an ideological patriotism, which is what Reform offers. I think the only real possibility of the kind of recovery that would enable the Tories to be a real threat to Labour in 2029 would be if it purges itself of this Farageist nationalism and reverts to being a traditional centre-right party.
When was the last time you knew churn like this, Peter? I remember people saying in the 2019 election, voters have come unstuck. They are releasing themselves from the votes that they cast again and again and again for years and years and years. But I mean, are we seeing that again? Is this more dramatic?
Oh, this is the most dramatic. We've had big churns. We had it in 1997 when the Tories were punished. We had it in 1983 when you had the Liberal SDP alliance and the Thatcher landslide. But this is quite unlike anything I've seen. The fact that we can say that there will probably be 200 Tory losses, possibly more. I mean, there's nothing in my lifetime, and I'm pretty old, there's been nothing like that in my lifetime. You have to go back to the last election before I was born in 1945, when the Tories under Churchill at the end of the war, they did lose, I think, 219 seats in the Attlee landslide. But in the last 79 years, we've had nothing like that.
That was Peter Kellner, co-founder of YouGov. We also heard from the Conservative candidate, Debbie Soloman, the Reform UK candidate, Lee Anderson, and Labour's Rhea Keehn. Also standing in Ashfield is the independent candidate, Jason Zadrozny, who's proposed increasing investment in the area, fighting local crime and improving parks, green spaces and leisure facilities. Daniel Holmes for the Liberal Democrats, whose priorities are fixing the health and care crisis, getting the economy back on track and ending the sewage scandal. And Alexander Coates for the Greens, who's campaigning on keeping the NHS, railways and social housing in public hands, promoting clean local energy and protecting the environment. This episode was produced by Chris Wade, the executive producer was Fiona Leach, and sound design and theme composition was by Mal Assetto. The story at thetimes.com is how you can get in touch with us should you feel the urge. Why not send this episode on to someone who you think might also enjoy it? Spread the word, or at the very least, give us a big fat 5 stars on whatever app you're listening to us on. I'm Luke Jones, and I'll see you soon.